Okay, folks, we still have a few seats over here on the to your left, my right. You don't need to be standing back there. We're going to kick off here in just a few minutes. Come on down to this side, over to your left.
Ladies and gentlemen, please move into the hall and take your seat. Our program is about to begin. I would ask you to please ensure that the center aisle is clear for the passing of the colors. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, the Executive Director of the Army Aviation Association of America, Mr. Bill Harris.
All right. Got to say, this is a heck of a crowd. I don't recall a crowd this big at the opening. Maybe it had something to do with not opening at 8 o'clock in the morning. But in any event, thank you all for being here. Got a bunch of admin stuff we got to go through. Please set your cell phones obviously on vibrate or shut them off completely. For those of you who are staying in our 22 overflow hotels, I'm sure you figured out by now there's very limited parking here at the Rockies. So please take the shuttles. I got reports this morning that we had a decent full buses here coming in. So we really appreciate that. There's 6 different routes, and there's all kinds of information on the app. If you did bring your own vehicle, make sure that you pay. We reduced the rate down to $9 here from their normal, whatever it is, $30 or $40 a day. But you do have to pay in order to get out, and don't block all the vehicles behind you. So they have set up desks out in the various lobby areas. Just go ahead and pay your $9. If you're actually staying in the hotel, in the Gaylord, make sure that the front desk has coded your key. So all you need to do is use your room key to get in and out. We have a mobile device app again this year. Thank you, L3 Harris. We use the Quad A, AAA events app to access the 24 Summit, get the latest information on speakers, agenda. As you can imagine, I think we were up to, the last printed version was like 48 on the agenda, so it changes almost daily. We've had a couple of last minute changes. Note that the PEO Aviation Industry Coordination session that was scheduled for this afternoon has been moved to Friday at 0900. So PEO is moved to Friday. The PM ACM Interface Leaders Q&A will be downstairs here Friday this afternoon, this afternoon at 1300, two stories down below here. If you haven't figured that out yet, this thing is 3 levels deep. We have a number of other corporate sponsors supporting the summit. We want to thank those guys. Our Wi-Fi in the meeting area and exhibit hall is sponsored by Spirit Aero Systems. Thank you. Please take note of the network username and password. If you have any tickets for either the Hall of Fame tomorrow night or the concert on Friday night that you're not going to use, please turn them back to the registration desks, particularly the help desk, which as you're facing, as you guys registered, all the way to the left. So if you go to the help desk, turn them in. We always have folks that are interested in getting a last-minute ticket. So if you are looking for a ticket and you don't have one, stop by the help desk periodically and see if they can accommodate you. If you do have guests, by the way, make sure they do pick up their badges. The security is pretty tight around here, and we want to make sure everybody's badged so we know who's here on premises. The Soldier Cafe, with reduced food and beverage prices, is available for our currently serving soldiers, all the compos. In addition, last year we added our Vietnam veterans. We have a bunch of those guys with us, and so we thought it'd be kind of cool to have the older folks in with the younger folks. So that's right out here in the Willow Lake meeting rooms 3, 4, and 5. It's on this level. Thank you, Team Chinook, for that sponsorship. If you're currently serving, just show your ID. If you're a Vietnam vet, you should have a Vietnam service ribbon on your badge. If you don't, just go back to registration, they'll get you one. No other retirees, please. It's just for the Vietnam vets. Okay, speaking of food, we had a #1 AER comment over the last couple of years has been, why do we have to leave the exhibit hall in order to get something to eat for lunch or snack or whatnot? So we've created a cafe downstairs, again, in the Adams Ballroom. And we also have an outdoor venue as well with a number of food trucks. You may have seen all the tables out there. Let's see, that's on what they call the Front Range lawn. It'll be open today, tomorrow, serving lunches and snacks. And we want to thank our sponsor, Leonardo, for helping to underwrite all that. We also want to thank Northrop Grumman for their exhibit hall and press room coffee sponsorship every day. And lastly, we don't give speaker gifts out anymore. We make contributions to both the Scholarship Foundation and the Trade School Licensing and Certification Foundation as well. So with that, I'm going to introduce in a second the president, the senior vice president of the Army Aviation Association of America. Many of you know our president, Walt Davis, had a serious infection a few weeks ago and is on IV antibiotics and unable to fly or attend. So we wish him well. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, the senior vice president of the Army Aviation Association of America, Major General Wally Golden. Wally.
Welcome to the Army Aviation Association of America's Mission Solutions Summit, where ideas converge, innovations inspire, and community leaders connect. At Quad A, we're more than just an organization, we're a community dedicated to supporting Army aviation soldiers and their families. Our theme this year is Transforming Aviation Warfighting, Strengthening the Sacred Trust. This summit serves as a testament to our unwavering commitment to each other and to the sacred trust we uphold in protecting our nation and soldiers on the ground who depend on us every day. It's more than just a meeting. It's a rare opportunity for the entire Army aviation community to come together, focus solely on the issues that matter. This year is also notable as we celebrate the remarkable milestone of 50 years of women in Army aviation, since the first female Army aviator, Colonel Sally Dale Murphy, graduated flight school in 1974. Over the past 5 decades, thousands of women in Army aviation have demonstrated courage, skill, and resilience in the face of challenges. Today, there is no doubt that women are fully integrated into the Army aviation branch, from junior enlisted to the most senior ranks, and contribute to the success of missions around the world. Let us celebrate their achievements as we look forward to the next 50 years and build upon this trailblazing spirit, leverage new technologies and strategies, and build partnerships to best support our Army aviation soldier and family.
Good morning. And welcome to Denver, Colorado, and Quad A 2024. Please rise for the presentation of the colors by the 4th Combat Aviation Brigade Color Guard, the singing of our national anthem by the 4th ID Band vocalist Sergeant Anna Rodriguez, and remain standing for the departure of the colors and the invocation by the Aviation Branch Honorary Chaplain, Colonel Retired Sonny Moore.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the lands of the free and the home of the brave?
Will you please bow your heads and pray with me? Bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that is within me, bless his holy name. Father, as we begin this 2024 Aviation Summit, Quad A Summit, we pause to give you your rightful place, to recognize you as Lord of all. Father, we thank you. You are our creator, our sustainer, our redeemer. You are Lord of all, and yet you know us all by name. Father, we're grateful this morning for this gathering of the Army Aviation family. We're grateful, God, for maintainers and operators. We're grateful for DA civilians and contractors and our industry partners and all of us who've gathered here. Thank you for safe travel. We do pray, God, that this will be a useful time, enjoyable time, as we encourage one another. Thank you, Father, that we live in such a great nation. And we do pray that you'll give our leaders, give them wisdom to make wise decisions, and give them backbone to back it up. Lord, this morning we do pray for those who have special needs. We pray for Major General Walt Davis. Lord, I know that many others that have special needs, health needs, and all kinds of needs. So, Lord, we do pray this morning. We look to you. Help us this day to live by what Paul said in 2 Thessalonians when he said, rejoice always, pray without ceasing, and in everything give thanks. So, Lord, we do give thanks. We love you, and bless this time, these days together. We pray in Jesus' name, amen.
Please join me in another round of applause for our outstanding color guard, Piper Scott Beach, Sergeant Rodriguez, and Chaplain Colonel Sonny Moore. Thank you. Please remain standing. As has been our tradition since 9/11, we take time at the start of each summit to acknowledge those who have made the ultimate sacrifice since our last Quad A Summit, our fallen heroes. Please join me in a round of applause for Piper Scott Beach for providing the stirring bagpipe music. Thank you, Scott. Please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, do we have any Gold Star family members in the audience today? Would you please stand up and be recognized? Thank you for your sacrifice. You will always be part of the Quad A family. We recently lost one of our Army aviation leaders and one past Quad A president who left an indelible mark on Army aviation and Quad A. Major General Anthony Tony Potts, who died suddenly last year while serving as the Program Executive Officer for Command, Control, Communications, Tactical, or PEO C3T, and Brigadier General retired Jim Hessen, former national president of both the Quad A and the Scholarship Foundation. Instead of a moment of silence, let's honor these outstanding Army aviation leaders with an enthusiastic round of applause. Thank you. We also are making a real effort to maintain our legacy in reaching out to our Korea and Vietnam veterans. We would now like to recognize some groups who are with us today. First, would all members of the 227th Assault Helicopter Battalion, 1st Cavalry Division, who served during the Vietnam War, please stand and be recognized. Would all our Korean and Vietnam veterans please stand so we can recognize you and express our gratitude. In the interest of time, I will not be recognizing all of our VIP guests by name, but we do have some folks we need to recognize. Former Assistant Secretary of the Army for Acquisition, Logistics, and Technology, Dr. Bruce Jetty. Retired General J.D. Thurman. The Surgeon General of the Army, Lieutenant General Mary Izaguirre. Retired Lieutenant Generals Edward Cardone, Tony Crutchfield, Mark Curran, Doug Gabram, Kevin Mangum, Mike Oates, Ray Palumbo, Eric Peterson, and Thomas Todd. Former Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness and Senior Army Aviator, retired Major General Jessica Wright. Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Army for Defense, Exports, and Cooperation, Mr. Pat Mason, and former Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Army for Training, Readiness, and Mobilization and Army Aviator, retired Major General Fred Reese. Members of our Army Aviation General Officer Steering Committee, formerly known as the Six Pack Plus One, led by Major General Mac McCurry, Major Generals Tom O'Connor, Wally Rugen, Brigadier Generals Kane Baker, Dave Phillips, Scott Wilkinson, and Dr. Stephen Smith. We also thank all of our other currently serving and retired general officers seated up here in the front rows. Your continued support helps make Army aviation the strongest it has ever been. Speaking of recognition, this year marks a very special anniversary in Army aviation history. In 1974, Lieutenant Colonel, then Second Lieutenant Sally Murphy, became the first woman to graduate from flight school. Unfortunately, Sally could not be with us today due to a family matter. Lieutenant Colonel retired Linda Hora Dumoulin is here at the convention but is not feeling well, but we'd like to recognize both of them. Linda was the Army's second female Army aviator, first female maintenance test pilot, first female aviation commander, Quad A European Aviation Company Commander of the Year in 1980, and a member of Quad A since 1975. Truly, an aviator who blazed the trail for future generations. Also joining her is one of her classmates, Colonel Retired Nancy Burt. Nancy, would you also stand and be recognized? Think of how far we have come from those days in 1974 to now, having outstanding leaders like Major General Jessica Wright, who we recognized a few minutes ago, and amazing current leaders like our keynote speaker tomorrow, 4-Star General Laura Richardson. Quite a journey indeed. I would next like to recognize our Quad A leadership team, the National Executive Group consisting of Major General Todd Royer and Brigadier General Tim Edens, as well as CW4 retired Becky Chambers, our membership vice president, Lieutenant Colonel retired Jan Grabzik, our chapter's vice president, as well as the members of the National Executive Board, all who serve as volunteers in a pro bono status to further the ideals of the Quad A motto, supporting the U.S. Army aviation soldier and family. Our allies are all well represented with the NATO Helicopter Inter-Service Working Group, the HISWIG. Would all HISWIG members please stand? We have general officers and representatives from 27 countries with us today, including Australia, Belgium, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Canada, Colombia, Denmark, Finland, France, Germany, Ghana, Israel, Italy, Japan, Korea, Luxembourg, Macedonia, the Netherlands, New Zealand, Poland, Portugal, Saudi Arabia, South Africa, Spain, Sweden, Turkey, United Arab Emirates, and the United Kingdom. Will all of our coalition partners, allies, and other foreign guests please stand and be recognized? Our National Guard State Army Aviation officers are holding their annual Leaders Conference here as well. Please stand and be recognized. Would all of our uniformed military and Department of the Army civilians please stand and be recognized for all you do for us every day, and please remain standing. Remain standing, remain standing. Would all our family members, industry partners, academia, media, and supporters of Army Aviation please also stand? This is our Army Aviation enterprise. We all serve to support Army Aviation soldiers and families. Welcome to everyone here at Quad A 2024. Obviously, we aren't kidding when we say Quad A is the umbrella organization for all aspects of the Army Aviation enterprise, community, family, and friends. As you saw in the opening video, Quad A is all about people through our mission statement. Quad A, supporting the U.S. Army Aviation, soldier, and family. This event is a perfect example of how we accomplish that with our 4 pillars of networking, recognition, voice, and support. From our professional program this morning to the various award ceremonies, Hall of Fame inductions, and industry partner exhibits, to our closing Soldier Appreciation Concert on Friday night, we are all about people, from career to retirement. There is no doubt Quad A is truly a family. No doubt we have a few challenges ahead as we transform to meet the threats around the world. That said, Army Aviation will never fail to deliver our brothers and sisters, support them, protect and enable them, and return them to safety anywhere, at any time, in any conditions. We must never forget we are ground troops ourselves who happen to fight in the third dimension of the ground regime, now referred to as the air-ground littoral space. Land warfare is the only reason we exist. It is now my pleasure to introduce the commanding general of one such premier land warfare formation. No stranger to Colorado, please welcome Major General David Doyle, Commanding General, 4th Infantry Division, for the local command welcome.
Wow, this is an incredible assembly of amazing leaders. Ladies and gentlemen, Mac, General Ezeguer, friends, and those of you who are associated with Quad A and the Army writ large, it's a wonderful opportunity to be here. On behalf of Command Sergeant Major Alex Caprati, the entire 4th Infantry Division in Fort Carson, we welcome you to Colorado and life at 5,000 feet. If you'd like, we could bring you just a little bit further south and you could experience Fort Carson and what 6,000 feet feels like. And I would promise you it's a little bit of a difference. I'm honored, though, to welcome you to the 2024 Aviation Missions Solutions Summit. The topic of today, transforming aviation warfighting, strengthening our sacred trust, is completely aligned with the Chief of Staff of the Army's focus on warfighting. Let me set the stage regarding warfighting and the aviation's sacred trust with the ground force with a story from a different time, but one that still illustrates that trust that exists and always has between the aviation community and the ground force. So in April of 2003, yes, this is ancient history, I led a ranger company to seize the Haditha Dam in western Iraq. The mission came to us in stride as we were on another operation. So we did some hood top Humvee planning and launched off to the objective. En route, during the 155 kilometer over the desert movement, we received outstanding support from several AH-6 Little Bird pilots. In fact, two of these gentlemen, and I remember their names well, Dave Maxwell and Bill Winnington, landed their AH-6s in the middle of the desert to copy my analog 1/100,000 map so they could take it back to the rest of their community. They flew it back, they transferred the map, and then they got back in the aircraft and started doing missions. Because of them, we did seize the dam, and it was a very, very close fight, but we faced significant resistance while we were securing it. So 4 days into the operation, we were out of water and almost out of ammunition, and we had taken many casualties. Our aviation team, again, provided critical support. We had cleared a small landing zone on the top of a tiny parking lot on top of a 13-story dam by broker torching some light posts, and we made the call for help. 2 MH-47s flew through broad daylight, ingressed, popped up to the top of the dam without any reconnaissance, without any go-arounds, and landed safely side by side with mere feet between their rotor discs. They sat on that LZ while S-60 fire and 152 ammunition splashed all over the dam, and they helped us offload the ammunition and water that we needed, and they took our casualties, and they took the prisoners of war that we had. So as I looked at the aircraft, and I can still visualize those visors, their sunscreens, they're looking straight at me, I couldn't understand why they were still there. I turned to my STS controller and said, "Get these aircraft out of here. We've got to get them going." And Francis Tatansky, CV3 Francis Tatansky and CV3 Ryan Minusko refused to leave until they had confirmation from me that the mission was complete. Now, admittedly, those 47s were just about off the ground, wheels barely touching. But they were not going to go until they knew they had fulfilled their obligation. They risked their lives and the lives of their crews to help us complete our mission. This is the living embodiment of a sacred trust. So now today, There are some people that are self-proclaimed experts who say that the entire concept of rotary-wing aviation is at risk. They question whether or not helicopters can even survive on the modern battlefield. However, as a member of the ground force, as a division commander entrusted with the lives of America's sons and daughters, I am not concerned, because I know our aviation community is entirely capable of adapting to the new threats and the challenges that exist on the battlefield as part of the Army's Combined Arms Team and the Joint Array. We are transitioning in contact. We are adapting. We are learning. We are growing. We are becoming better. And our aviation force is involved in innovation every single day. Our combat aviation brigades are the place where that happens, supported by the outstanding enterprise that makes the aviation work. And so I'll tell you just a little bit about some of those things that are happening in just a moment. But change and innovation is nothing new in our Army nor our aviation community. In 1973, Major General Don Starry spoke at a Quad A event about innovation. His remarks centered on perhaps changing some of the aviation reconnaissance elements to armor elements, and that was not really popular at the time. I'm sure it wouldn't be very popular now. But he said the Army needed fresh thinking about aviation after the lessons gained from the Vietnam War. He stated, and I quote, "The present needs some fresh thinking, and the future demands a new direction." We can absolutely draw parallels between what he said 51 years ago and what's happening today. We are transitioning our TTPs and doctrine from what we had done and successfully in the global war on terrorism to the operations and methods that are going to make us successful in large-scale combat operations. We're reframing how the aviation's role in multi-domain operations works, and like Major General Starry, we're talking about the demands of the future, things that need to be done now that'll enable us to continue to fight and win on any battlefield. So continuous transformation and innovation are taking place. They are our watchwords. They're happening in the Army and they're happening in our cabs. So what's happening at the CTCs, the Combat Training Centers, is a great example of how Army innovation and aviation innovation are combining. Maybe the best thing you could understand is that the 82nd, the 101st, and most recently 1st Cab are exercising incredible missions and gaining knowledge on joint forcible entry operations as they participate in individual rotations that are designed to stress the cab itself. This fall, 4th Cab out of Fort Carson will join that group of organizations and conduct its own joint forcible entry exercise, flying from Colorado to Fort Irwin to be able to exercise everything that they need to do and back. So during 2 recent National Training Center rotations, 4th Cab with 34 AHB and 617 Cab successfully navigated the IADS in China Lake. And they did so under rigorous conditions where they were flying with new formations and new techniques. So we had centralized planning, they had reach back, but individual pilots were learning or relearning how to fly in large-scale combat operations environments. Every aircraft made it to its target. All of them got back off the LZ and returned to base, and we learned an enormous amount of how we have to operate in the future. But it doesn't stop at the combat training centers. 4th Cab is capitalizing on these successes, learning from others, and working on home station training, just like every other cab. So last week, 24 GSAB executed a 700-mile round-trip long-range air assault. This required enormous support from the cab and the sustainment enterprise, and it included transition of sling loads to move fuel blizzards over 100 miles, to set up a rotating FARP concept. It used a Marine Corps C-130 for a wet wing, capitalizing on that joint relationship, and helped us see where the intelligence overlay and the fires enterprise have to be integrated for our aviation community to be successful. So we're learning how to fight as the 4th Infantry Division, and we're learning how to fight successfully with our aviation community. And I believe that that fight will be dependent on the sacred trust between ground force commanders and our Army aviation leadership. So, if there's only one thing I would ask you to remember in this impressive collection of leaders today, now is the time to innovate. Much like 51 years ago, successful innovation requires all of us, and Army aviation will continue to cement the sacred trust between the ground force and those who fly. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. I look forward to speaking with you and hearing all the different things that are happening. And I know that this is going to be a successful event for Quad A, for the aviation community, and for the United States Army. Steadfast and loyal, be all you can be. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, General Doyle, for taking time out of what we know is a busy schedule to welcome us here this morning. The Undersecretary of the Army, the Honorable Gabe Camarillo, had planned to be with us this morning, but had a last-minute conflict that prevented his travel. Fortunately, he was able to record his remarks in a video that expresses his support for this largest gathering of the year for our community. Please direct your attention to the screens. The Honorable Gabe Camarillo.
Good morning. It's great to be with all of you here at Quad A. I regret that family commitments prevented me from joining you in person, but I'm delighted to have this opportunity to speak with the aviation community and join all of you at this important conference. The Army's aviation community is instrumental to our ability to accomplish our overall mission, especially in a time of significant change. And I appreciate the work that all of you do to keep our Army safe and to promote the security of our nation. I wanted to take a couple of minutes to highlight a few special accomplishments by Army aviators this past year. First, I would note that Secretary of the Army Christine Wormuth awarded Colonel Frank Rubio, a former UH-60 pilot, the Army astronaut device on February 22nd. Colonel Rubio spent 371 days aboard the International Space Station from 2022 to 2023, breaking the record for the longest space flight for both an Army soldier and any American astronaut. Second, I want to congratulate the 2024 inductees into the Army Aviation Hall of Fame. First, I want to recognize my good friend, General Jim McConville, our former Chief of Staff of the Army, who I had the distinct pleasure of serving alongside for many years. Sergeant First Class Christopher Solis, who is deceased but is also a Medal of Honor recipient. Captain Larry L. Taylor, United States Army retired, who is also a Medal of Honor recipient. Major General Jeffrey J. Schlosser, United States Army retired. And Captain Ronald A. Radcliffe, United States Army retired. Congratulations to all of our 2024 Army Aviation Hall of Fame inductees. I salute all of your tremendous service to our Army and to Army aviation writ large. Let me begin by restating our Army leadership's commitment to aviation safety, as evidenced by the recently announced stand-up. We are responding to aviation safety concerns stemming from incidents in the last few months by renewing our commitment to getting our aviators the right training instruction and the right number of sets and reps to be trained at the highest level. I appreciate the support from all of you in focusing on risk management and in keeping our soldiers safe. But today, I do want to spend the rest of my time with you covering the state of our aviation portfolio and how the aviation community can continue to lead the way as we transform to face future threats. I'll begin by saying this. Our aviation assets help us see and sense, strike and move, and extend command and control in critical ways. The Army and the Joint Force rely on these contributions on today's battlefields and well into the future. Accomplishing this mission will require us to equip warfighters with a mix of innovative and enduring capabilities, and I think we have the right investments in place to do so. You all have seen the major changes in our FY25 budget submission, and I think it's important to discuss why we made these changes and, more importantly, how they relate to future opportunities. First, let me emphasize, we are firmly committed to the Army's aviation industrial base. We have a large and diverse network of suppliers that the Army has to rely upon in order to keep up our innovation and to maintain the capabilities that we need. We faced an unacceptable risk of closure of production lines for our Black Hawk and Chinook platforms, and we found that we needed to take action. Second, the changing nature of warfare also meant that we had to refocus our priorities. While we will not fight exactly as we've witnessed in Ukraine, between the Ukrainian army and the Russians, we are learning from that conflict. Our aviators and crewed capabilities will always play a critical role in our aviation enterprise, even as unmanned systems have become ubiquitous and they play an increased role in ISR and strike missions. We will continue to need teams of manned and unmanned systems to win against a near-peer threat. These teams of platforms will work together to see, cue each other, and to strike. And to build teams capable of future success, we need to invest in unmanned systems and launched effects. I do want to recognize that the Army aviation community is leading the way in this space, with the Aviation Center of Excellence leading analysis and driving requirements, while our system developers bring in cutting technology at speed. This is why the Secretary and the Chief chose to rebalance our aviation portfolio. We made a very difficult decision to end FARA development in order to take advantage of other investment opportunities critical to future battlefields and to maintain the strength and resilience of our industrial base. You've seen that rebalance reflected in our 25 budget submission in the aviation portfolio, where we're spending $1.75 billion on RDT&E and $1.66 billion on procurement. That includes almost $200 million in R&D funding to mature our launched effects portfolio, to test it and to improve future tactical UAS programs, and to enhance the UH-60 Black Hawk platform. We'll invest $25 million in enhancements to UH-60, planning an award in the second quarter of FY25, $30 million to continue developmental test and integration of FTUAS, and pay for a $35 million increase in R&D in our launched effects portfolio. Our procurement spending will allow us to buy 24 new UH-60 Mike model aircraft, 10 Chinook Block II platforms, 7 FTUAS systems, and increased quantities of launched effects systems. The Army remains committed to the revolutionary range and speed that our FLRAA platform will deliver as it approaches Milestone B in the third quarter of FY24. And we look forward to the critical design review in first quarter of FY25. The FLRAA platform's ability to operate from standoff, to enable the rapid massing and dispersion of combat power, enables survivability of the entire combined arms team on future battlefields. We've also captured, I should note, critical innovations from our FARA investment that will benefit our entire aviation portfolio, even as we wind down our developmental efforts on that program. Particularly, this will show up in the areas of model-based systems engineering and modular open systems architectures. Additionally, a successful ground run of one of the prototype aircraft for FARA will reduce risks on future improved turbine engine integration efforts onto other platforms. I just want to underscore that the Army's leadership is fully committed to the entire aviation community and to the aviation industrial base. A diverse mix of enduring and transformational capabilities will allow us to field systems to fight and win well into the future. Having highlighted a number of Army aviation innovations, I want to discuss a few areas that the Army will need this community's help in as we continue to innovate as we drive forward. First, I spoke with many of you about this in AUSA's Huntsville conference, but I want to emphasize it again in this context. Our systems, including our aviation platforms, are becoming increasingly software defined. We will need to update those software baselines continuously to keep our platforms and the subsystems that integrate into it effective. That will require us to maintain form factors even as we upgrade systems, but also design software to minimize the need to retest. One way that we can do this is through the use of a modular system approach, as seen on both the FARA development efforts and on our current FLRAA program. Army Aviation is leading the way for the Army in this space, using MOSA to allow us to add, modify, replace, and remove system components across a platform's acquisition lifecycle. We'll be able to constantly update and to improve systems, subsystems, software components, and services with minimal disruption to a system's overall functioning and shape. MOSA is an important consideration in FLRAA development, and it's a critical feature that will keep us agile in the FTUAS space. In addition to MOSA, digital engineering will play a significant role moving forward in software-defined capabilities, allowing us to examine the trade-offs and impacts of upgraded hardware and software while minimizing the need to conduct physical tests. This community, the aviation community, has been leading the Army in the implementation of digital engineering, and we need you to keep doing it. Buying software-defined platforms that rely on open systems and digital engineering to facilitate modular upgrades will mean that the Army has to change our buying models, and that industry will need to adapt as we move forward. Traditional procurement models are very different from an approach that keeps numerous vendors involved on an ongoing basis and competes incremental upgrades that we buy in relatively small quantities. We have and we will continue to work together, the entire Army aviation enterprise and the aviation industrial base, to figure out how we can meet each other's needs. We will also ask all of you to keep innovating alongside each other, staying in the game to compete for the next software or hardware upgrade. And we understand that you all still need to make a fair profit. Changing buying models isn't an opportunity to squeeze the industrial base. It's a necessity to ensure that we can adapt and get access to the latest technology to fight and win future wars. Unit prices for individual pieces of hardware and software may well change if we're using them for shorter durations. I spoke at length at AUSA Huntsville about how we're putting this model into action in the context of small UAS. We're keeping multiple vendors in the game to innovate and build tranches of small UAS systems based on the requirements of the moment, while also allowing lower level units to purchase approved COTS UAS systems so that they can experiment with new TTPs. That's an approach that we'll continue using as we work to provide organic UAS capabilities at every echelon, from the squad to division and above, along with COTS systems to ensure that our formations have the required situational awareness. The final area where we will need your help to innovate is to help us navigate a crowded airspace. Navigating, deconflicting, and executing missions in the air will require us to better understand and act in a three-dimensional environment with congested space and a contested electromagnetic spectrum. We will need your help to ensure that our mix of enduring systems and evolving autonomous capabilities can work effectively in human-machine teams. It will require significant investments in airspace management tools. Our network needs to modernize, investments in artificial intelligence and machine learning, and advancing along the aviation center's path to autonomy. We're still in the S&T research and development phase on many of these efforts, and we intend to invest significantly in them in the years ahead. In closing, I just want to say that aviation is an essential part of the Army's future. All of you are leading the way by ensuring that we have the right mix of enduring and new systems and training in the years ahead. We're making significant investments in technology and in capabilities that we'll need in the future. But we will need all of your help to solve tough problems posed by future operating environments, emerging threats, to ensure that we can enable the joint force to fight and win. The aviation community in the Army is large and diverse, and we need to make sure that all of you make investments that are needed to deliver for our warfighters. Pilots, maintainers, engineers, acquisition experts, and veterans who remain engaged with this community long after they've taken the uniform off, continue to ensure collectively that the Army has the best expertise and ability anywhere seen around the world. Industry, not just our primes, but also includes the sub-vendors, vendors who focus on avionics, subsystems, mission control systems, training systems. All of you play a critical role in designing and fielding platforms and getting the right tools available to our soldiers. All of you collectively will be critical in building the Army's aviation community of the future, and by undertaking this incredible transformation, you will always maintain the sacred trust with the soldier on the ground. Thank all of you again. I welcome you to Quad A, and I hope the rest of your conference is rewarding and productive. Thank you.
We thank Mr. Camarillo for sharing his message with us. We are privileged to have with us this morning the 46th Surgeon General of the Army and Commanding General of U.S. Army Medical Command, Lieutenant General Mary Izaguirre, who will provide us with some perspective on medical modernization. Ladies and gentlemen, General Izaguirre.
Thank you so much. Good morning. How are y'all doing? Fellow general officers, coalition and ally partners, ladies and gentlemen of the Army aviation community, I am so grateful for this opportunity to show and discuss how Army medicine, partnering with Army aviation, is transforming in support of the future fight, ensuring that soldiers have the best care in the world, and that shoulder to shoulder on the battlefield, they can be confident that we are keeping that sacred trust that we've already heard talked about so much this morning. Now, I want to start by, again, thanking you for being here. I am an Army flight surgeon, so actually what I see through the lights are a whole bunch of patients. Although your community is unique, I'm also a family physician, but you all didn't spend a lot of time in my exam room starting off. In fact, I would usually come to your place of work. There was one instance when I was in Afghanistan downrange, was in the back is where I belong. I fly a mean simulator, but that's about as far as it goes. I plug in and put on, and all of a sudden my eardrums just about ruptured because the sound was turned up so high. So I whispered into the mic, I said, "Hey, who set the volume today?" There was a moment of silence. Sheepishly, the PC turned around and raised his hand. I said, "Okay, I'll see you once we get back on the ground." But I am honored again to care for such an amazing community. So as we just heard from Honorable Camarillo, the topic of transformation and modernization is front and center for our Army. Secretary Wormuth and General George have been clear and consistent with their emphasis on our need to transform in contact across the .mil-PF to support the warfighter, to contend with today's increasingly complex and volatile world. And as Army medicine modernizes to address the volume and severity of casualties predicted from large-scale combat operations, Army aviation is a key partner to help us improve survival, clear the battlefield, and return troops to duty so that we can win this nation's wars. Now, fortunately, we can take lessons of innovation from the past, from where aviation and medicine have intersected. We've combined our collective skills and our commitment to safety and high reliability to accomplish high-risk missions safely. We have a history of making possible what was thought to be impossible together. Since the 1940s, aviation has played a key role in Army medicine's ability to support soldiers in battle. From the early days of rotary wing aircraft being used in Burma to rescue downed pilots, brave aviators and medics have combined talents to maintain sacred trust and bring their fellow service members home. An innovator of his time, Major Spurgeon Neal was the first aviation medicine officer, pioneering principles of aeromedical evacuation during the Korean War, credited with saving many lives. At this very meeting, at the Quad A meeting in 1961, a few years ago, he was awarded the Army Aviation Safety Award for translating the aviation safety practices to Army medicine. He went on to serve as the Army's first health services commander in the early 1980s. Again, Army medicine benefiting from that talent of leadership and safety focus that is such a fabric of who you are. And then Vietnam pilot Major Charles L. Kelly's heroism and commitment to medical evacuation ushered in the next era of transformation. Dust off. Are there any dust off out in the crowd? I thought so. With the quote, "When I have your wounded," attributed to him, becoming the collective and personal credo of dust-off pilots who followed. And then CW4, Michael Novosel, further advanced aeromedical evacuation in Vietnam, being credited with evacuating more than 2,200 wounded personnel and extracting some 5,500 wounded soldiers and Vietnamese. At 48 years old, he became the oldest Army recipient of the Medal of Honor. The home of Army Aviation, Fort Novosel, bears his name, honoring his legacy. Now, over the last 24 years of our current conflict, Army medicine has transformed in contact through revolutions in tactical combat casualty care, blood product resuscitation, damage control surgery, and rapid evacuation to a higher level of care. So today I'm going to share with you how Army medicine is modernizing and specifically focusing then on Army aviation and how we will move this forward together on behalf of our soldiers and keeping faith with our nation. Large-scale combat operations with increased evacuation distances, battlefields made transparent through the use of UAVs, increased risk of disease, non-battle injury, which is the #1 reason for evacuation, and enemies that are willing to target medical assets will require similar innovation, bravery, and commitment of the aviation and medical communities as we demonstrated in the past and just discussed. Army medicine modernization is based on the principles of sustaining the health of the force and contributing to the lethality of the warfighter. And there's 3 big things I'm going to base the rest of our comments on today. 1, we must clear the battlefield, enabling maneuver forces to maintain momentum, evacuating casualties from the front lines to preserve the capacity of those far forward medical units, again, ideally to return soldiers to the fight and when needed, treat and evacuate back. We must improve survivability. The current models at the CTCs and the warfighters are quite concerning. And we must do this by delivering care far forward, by medical professionals who are proficient in prolonged casualty care in the cases where the air is not permissive and nor is the ground. We're seeing this in Ukraine and learning from how they are dealing with these challenges. Casualty damage control resuscitation techniques, and we must be able to execute successfully long-distance critical care transfers if we're going to save our troops. And then third, I've mentioned it already, returning soldiers to the fight. This is a shift in the paradigm that every soldier wounded in action is evacuated to a Role 4 or stateside MTF in 72 hours or less. We were very proud of that standard during the coin fight. The reality is, with the scope of casualties anticipated, we will need a different answer. Returning soldiers to the fight will decrease the burden placed on the personnel replacement system as well as enhancing the maneuver of the commander and making sure that the soldiers needed to fight our nation's wars with the experience requisite are staying in the fight. Now, conflict against our patent threat of China and our acute threat of Russia presents unique dilemmas that require an evacuation capability with speed, reach, and capacity to keep pace with the warfighter. That increased capacity is imperative to our success in LSCO, particularly in an Indo-PACOM scenario. Patient evacuations from Role 2 to Role 3 treatment facilities will often cover hundreds of miles to theater hospitals, on ships, or islands dispersed across the region, and the Army is who the Joint Force turns to ensure this intra-theater evacuation. Now, the Army has relied on the Black Hawk, or as I like to call it, the majestic Black Hawk, as the utility workhorse of the aviation fleet for more than 40 years. It has flown millions of hours, safely transporting hundreds of thousands of soldiers, pounds of cargo, and what I believe may be its most sacred mission, evacuated thousands of patients in need of medical care. Now, because of its reputation as a safe, versatile, and reliable platform, the Black Hawk will continue to play a key role in transporting patients for many years to come. But despite its proven worthiness on the battlefield, the Black Hawk does have limitations as informed by our simulations, experiments, and exercises. And these limitations will become especially apparent as future demands extend our lines farther and farther from facilities that can offer life-saving care. The ability to administer life-saving interventions en route will be essential as we transport the injured against far dispersed regions. Now, for the battlefield of the future, our capability development directorates have been hard at work, as you can see, and it is an integrated system that will both enhance our ability to provide care at the point of need, as well as to evacuate back. We've got to integrate manned and unmanned platforms. They must be synchronized by a common command and control structure that delivers the most seriously wounded soldiers to Role 3 in the division area. Clearing these casualties will improve their survival and enhance maneuver speed for the commander on the ground. Absent this capability, accumulation of casualties on the battlefield will stress the capacity of organic medical assets. Now, humans will continue to lead the aerial evacuation of our wounded, as they have since the 1950s. But technological advancements will soon enable autonomous as well as semi-autonomous vehicles to play key roles in this process. While these AI and human-machine integrated technologies offer promise, we must remain vigilant and manage the associated risks and ethical considerations to ensure that the injured soldier's safety remains the focus of our process. And this is where the aviation and the medical community's pivotal partnership have an opportunity to move forward together as we develop these platforms as well as the policies that guide their use. And we must do that through a joint, combined, coalition, and allied lens. So in the meantime, we will transform the Black Hawk as it continues to be a crucial part of the Army aviation community well into the future. Targeted modernization efforts will ensure the readiness and relevancy of this platform for years to come. Now, currently, the HH-60 Mike modernization efforts include the highly anticipated medical interior upgrade that will be available for production in FY26, with prototypes currently in use by 5 medevac units across all compos. Another area where medical evacuation shines is the integration of the total force. This upgrade offers unprecedented modularity in this model. It is a clear predecessor to the FLRAA medevac cabin and gives the ability to rapidly reconfigure the aircraft based upon mission circumstances. Other potential future Black Hawk upgrades include an upgrade Medevac Mission Sensor, MMS, that allows crews to see farther and with greater clarity than ever before. These upgrades increase decision space for crews, reduce workload, and increase situational awareness, which results in safer flying for all involved. The continued investment into Army medical evacuation is paramount to clearing the battlefield to increase survivability. Fielding these capabilities that meet the operational requirements for the joint force of the future battlefield is critical in ensuring the success of ground and air missions alike. Now, LISCO modeling indicates that multimodal evacuation, as you can see on this slide, is required to address the volume of casualties predicted. Maneuver speed on the LISCO battlefield will be impacted, and our ability to return soldiers to duty and unburden ground force commanders will be critically hinged on this capability. Lessons learned at CVCs, as mentioned by Major General Doyle, have highlighted many things. One is the need for integration of CASEVAC into battalion and brigade level training plans across the force. The Combined Arms Center, through the Centers of Excellence, is leading the effort to improve CASEVAC training and integration through the establishment of a CASEVAC proponency. This proponency will be critical to integrate evacuation across the continuum of care. Now, you'll notice the center of the slide is the 68 Whiskey, and the continuum of care begins with the 68 Whiskey combat medic. Since the tyranny of distance between certain regions will create a need for prolonged care further forward on the battlefield, we have expanded our Army paramedic training to meet the need. We will be building 68 Whiskey combat paramedics. And although it will take several years to grow the program, we've already begun, like you, transforming in contact by partnering with the civilian sector for schooling at Fort Liberty as well at Fort Bliss. And we are also coding some positions inside the Army Medical Command for this new capability. Likewise, in FY26, the Medical Center of Excellence will begin delivering 68 Whiskey paramedic combats to select positions in Security Force Assistance Command units. Our ultimate goal is to train 80% of our 68 Whiskeys as combat medics as combat paramedics. These frontline medics must be well-equipped and trained in techniques much like the critical care flight paramedics who have experienced such success in this community. They must be trained to provide complex interventions to our severely wounded soldiers over an extended period of time with limited reach-back capabilities. Getting to our Role 2 and Role 3, these assets are also transforming to be more mobile and more survivable. To augment Role 2 medical care, we will field the Army's newest medical unit in October of this year, a Prolonged Care Augmentation Detachment, or PCAD. The first PCAD will be at Fort Liberty and is designed to provide critical patient care when medevac delays are anticipated due to lack of freedom of maneuver. To complement this prolonged care capability, as well as improved ground evacuation survivability, we have also invested in protected ground ambulances. Now, observations from Ukraine have showed us that soft-sided vehicles do not survive on the battlefield, losing both the patient as well as the medical personnel involved. Continued development of the protected wheeled ambulance, as well as the Stryker medical evacuation vehicle and the evacuation variants of the armored multi-purpose vehicle, provide ground force commanders with improved evacuation options. Now, synchronization of these assets with the HH-60 Mike and FLRAA, supplemented with manned and unmanned CASEVAC, is essential to improve survival, clear the battlefield, and maximize return to duty. At the Role 3 level, capability developers are also experimenting with the Role 3 hospital in the division area. This unit provides damage control surgery closer to the point of need. Again, it's mobile and it is survivable. Unlike our former Role 3 that could take 6 or 7 acres, this is less than half an acre, and it can go up and come down in less than 8 hours versus the 7 to 8 days that was typical of our previous Role 3. It enables faster return to duty and complements the definitive care provided by the current field hospital while enabling speed, again, for the maneuver commander. And all these efforts, the partnership between modernization, aviation, and the medical communities is essential to ensure we are keeping that sacred trust with our soldiers, ensuring that the LISCO capabilities are delivered to the warfighter at their time of need. As the integrator of Army medicine capabilities, my staff and I stand ready to continue to grow our partnership, working together to deliver the capabilities needed to ensure that the joint force can answer our nation's call. Together, we are key players in this new era of combat casualty care, focused as those legends who came before us on executing our mission successfully so that others may live. It is an honor to serve with each and every one of you. Thank you again for this opportunity to share where Army medicine is going in modernizing, transforming in contact to contribute to the lethality of our nation and service to our soldiers as well as our warfighting mission. Combat ready care, this will defend, be all you can be. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, General Izaguirre, for taking time out of what we know is a very busy schedule to join us here in Denver this morning. A few announcements before our final speaker this morning. As a reminder, the PEO Aviation Industry Coordination Session has been moved to Friday at 0900 rather than this afternoon. The Aviation Leaders Q&A sessions will be held in the Q&A Theater down 2 levels from here in the Adams Exhibit Hall, booth number 3309, beginning at 1300 hours with the first of 2 p.m. ACM interface panels. Remember, if you are looking to turn in tickets to either the Hall of Fame banquet tomorrow night or Friday night's Soldier Appreciation Dinner concert, go to the Quad A help desk in the badge pickup area and drop them off. Tomorrow, 25 April, is Anzac Day, which is broadly similar to Memorial Day in that it commemorates all Australians and New Zealanders who served and died in all wars, conflicts, and peacekeeping operations. The Australian and New Zealand contingents will be holding a sunrise ceremony at 0545 tomorrow out on the Sunrise Lawn and invite anyone interested to join them. Make sure to visit the Quad A booth in the corridor outside the Aurora exhibit hall downstairs and consider making a tax-deductible donation to the Scholarship Foundation and/or the Trade Schools, Licensing, and Certification Foundation. Finally, if you are not a Quad A member, make sure to visit our membership folks in the same location and sign up today. Our professional program theme is Transforming Aviation Warfighting, Strengthening Our Sacred Trust. There is no doubt we are truly in a time of transformational change, and Major General Mac McCurry saw it coming. Ladies and gentlemen, what you've been waiting for all morning, our Aviation Branch Chief, Major General Mac McCurry.
This will defend.
Fly Army.
Above the best.
Good morning, everybody. Wally, thanks for that gracious introduction. You know, I have to confess that today the pressure is really on these remarks, and not for the reason you think. You see, my mother and father are here. They're sitting right back here. And I might have to curb my normally colorful description of some of our frustrating issues. You know, she spent many years with the prayer group on the rosary trying to make sure I turned out okay. So I do have to say, too, my dad is a green hat. So to this crowd over here, I saw some hats earlier. So he's a green hat, class of 7340, along with Lieutenant General Daly. That class has mutually agreed that no one will disclose the identity of the aviators that climbed the fence and jumped in the pool during the CG's reception that year. I always say we stand on the shoulders of giants, and I wouldn't be standing here today without my mom and dad. My dad taught me what it meant to be a professional, to be a soldier, to care about soldiers, and my mother taught me about discipline. So thanks, Mom and Dad. Distinguished guests, legacy leaders, six-pack members, cab command teams, leaders, soldiers, ladies and gentlemen, friends of Army Aviation, it's great to see everybody here joining us for the annual summit in this much different venue, a little bit further to the west. Special thanks to the Gaylord, Rockies Resort and staff, to our national executive group who were recognized earlier, but also the staff that actually makes things happen, you know, Janice Arena. Also Bill Harris and Joe Paisano back here making sure everybody gets on stage in the right order at the right time. You know, this organization, originally envisioned in 1957 by Art and Dottie Keston, has been supporting aviation soldiers and families now for 67 years, well before the birth of our separate branch. I want to provide my very individual and personal thanks to the Aviation Graybeards, former branch chiefs, the senior executive associates, and I want to talk about that group for a minute. I think General Oates is here somewhere. The senior executive associates is a group of former ground commanders, retired general officers. This group was started by General Crosby Saint as aviation was emerging as a branch 41 years ago. And the purpose of it was to make sure that we didn't go down a separate path from our ground maneuver brothers. And so they've been instrumental in providing advice to the six-pack and mentorship to all of us, and especially me, over the last 2 years. So gentlemen, thank you very much for that. The other group that I want to call out and give special recognition to are my six-pack brothers right over here. You know, this group of warfighters meets every single week to make sure that we are continuously flying missions in support of our ground maneuver force and that we're doing so safely. And right in front of me right here, my lifelong friend, my battle buddy for many years now as we worked in and outside the Pentagon, I want to thank Major General Wally Rugen. Wally's getting ready to transition to the other side of the room in a little bit, but there is not a single individual in our force that has given more over the last 10 years to make sure that we are prepared for the future than Wally. I'd also like to express my great appreciation for all of our allies and partners in attendance this year that we recognized earlier out here. You know, we do not fight together. We go as a team. We go as a coalition. So it's very important that we have these dialogues, that we work on agreements, as General Rugen and now General Baker have done agreements with our partners and allies on future vertical lift. So thank you for being here. Okay, so in Army Aviation, it's all about standards. No compromise, right, DES? That's Joe McCarthy out there. He was late. So Hey, unfortunately what that means to all the CW5s here, and I know there should be a couple because it's almost noon, what it means to our warrant officers is that there's little chance that Sunrise Yoga is going to replace the ACFT, okay? Team, seriously, we have a lot to be proud of. Today, I hope to talk a little bit about us, where we come from, our challenges, and where we're headed. 41 years since the Secretary of the Army, John O. Marsh, approved Army Aviation becoming a separate branch of the combat arms. Long before that, however, we were serving the ground force, learning to dominate the terrain from above, as General Wallace reminded me recently. Make no mistake, team, this is why we exist. We exist for one reason: to support the soldier on the ground. Since 1861, when Union Army aeronauts, led by Professor Thaddeus Lowe, began flying balloons during the Civil War, through air mobile, attack, and medevac missions in Vietnam and onto the battlefields of Iraq and Afghanistan, Army Aviation has demonstrated its charter and its sacred trust time and time again. This is our culture. And no matter the platform or the weapon system, the sacred trust must permeate all we do yesterday, today, and tomorrow. You know, there's a lot of big words out there today: transformation, transforming in contact, multi-domain operations, convergence. To me, it's warfighting. After all, we are the original multi-domain force in the Army. When others were seeing the battlefield on a map or a tabletop, Army aviators were visualizing in 3 dimensions. So let's take a look at who we are and where we're going in Army Aviation's sector of the profession of arms. First, inside this particular celebration, you've heard a couple times today, we're also celebrating the 50th year of women in Army Aviation. So Colonel Retired Sally Murphy, also Colonel Nancy Burt, and Colonel Linda Horan-Dumoulin, you've heard them all recognized this morning. First female graduates of Army Rotary Wing flight training. Since then, we've had women throughout our ranks, serving alongside their male counterparts. My own daughter, age 64, pilot right here in General Doyle's division. So it's a family business, and we keep it moving. You know, the senior Army aviator on active duty will be here tomorrow, General Laura Richardson. And you'll hear her perspectives, which might be different than ours inside the branch or ours inside the Army, as she is a combatant commander receiving forces and defining capabilities needed by the services. So I look forward to her remarks. Next, I'd like to talk about what makes us up. First, our enlisted soldiers. You know, we have many enlisted soldiers. Let's go to the next slide if we could. We have enlisted soldiers in Army Aviation that have earned the Medal of Honor. I'm going to talk about one today, but there's multiple. And how often do we talk about those soldiers that support those of us that are moving the controls? Let me talk about Sergeant First Class Rodney J.T. Yano, 3rd generation Japanese American from the island of Hawaii, an aviation maintainer. Normally a TI, on January 1st, 1969, he volunteered to fly as a crew chief and door gunner on a mission. This aircraft, by the way, was flown by another Army aviation legend, Doc Bonson, who we lost earlier this year. In the course of this mission, they were engaging targets with the door guns, they were marking targets with white phosphorus grenades, and as they took fire, white phosphorus ignited in the cabin of the aircraft. Sergeant Yano, grievously wounded by the first explosion of the white phosphorus grenades, blinded by the light, lost use of one of his arms, he managed to hold onto the roof of the cabin and begin to kick the crates of white phosphorus grenades out the door. The crew up front, their vision was obscured and they had lost control of the aircraft. It was going to crash. But due to Sergeant Yano's extraordinary efforts, the crates left the aircraft, the smoke dissipated, Doc Bonson regained control of the aircraft, and the guys in the front seat survived. Unfortunately, Sergeant Yano succumbed to his wounds. This is what our enlisted force is made of. This is what our enlisted force does for us every day, supporting those of us on the controls. Let me talk about our officers for a minute. You see up here Major Ed Too Tall Freeman. Okay? What a story. Enlists in the Navy. Before he's graduated from high school, he enlists in the Navy in World War II. Serves 2 years. When the war ends, he goes back and graduates from high school and then joins the Army. He rises through the ranks, and he's a first sergeant in a combat engineer unit on Pork Chop Hill in Korea. At the end of that battle, there were 14 survivors of 257 in his unit. He received a battlefield commission and then led the way back up the hill. What thrilled him most about receiving a battlefield commission is it made him eligible to go to flight school, and being a pilot had been his dream. So initially, he was 6'4" and a little bit, and too tall to get in the cockpit by our regulations at that time. And eventually, we lowered the standards or increased the standards, I guess, and let him in. Good thing for us. Good thing for people in the Yadrang Valley, because he becomes the epic warrior alongside Major Crandall that flies in and out of LZ X-ray, saving people, pulling them out, delivering bullets, water. This is what we expect of our aviators. You know, he was very technically competent. Another person, we have word for these technically competent people in Army aviation, the stewards of our standards, those that keep us straight when we're in the cockpit, and we call them warrant officers. And you're looking at one of them right here. So last year we had the opportunity to redesignate the installation of our aviation center. And I get asked all the time about it. And I say, look, here is a son of Croatian immigrants. English was a second language. Grew up in Etna, Pennsylvania. World War II kicks off, and Mike Novosel tries to join. Exact opposite problem of Freeman, right? Those of you that know, he makes me look tall, okay? So he's an eighth of an inch too short. He's 17 years old. The doctor that's screening him says, well, how old are you? He says, well, I'll be 18 like next week. And they say, if you promise to grow an eighth of an inch, you can join. So we let him in the Army. Army Air Forces at that time, and he goes and flies bombers in the Pacific. In fact, he's flying one of the bombers over the top of the deck of the Missouri in cover when Douglas MacArthur and the Japanese are signing the documents to end that war. He continues his service in the Air Force, flying cargo, and when Korea kicks off, he says, I need to get into that, so he flies cargo planes on and off the peninsula. He's a lieutenant colonel when Vietnam kicks off, and he says, I still got more to serve. I can serve my nation. I have more to give. Goes back to the Air Force, and they say, no need for somebody your age that's a lieutenant colonel. So, the Army will take anybody, right? So he comes to the Army, and we say, hey, you got to be a warrant officer. You're way too good of an aviator to be a commissioned officer in the Army, so you got to be a warrant officer. And he says he envisions that he's going to teach flight school at Camp Walters or at Fort Rucker. But to hear Mike's, if you read Mike's bio, he says, nope, they just sent me to work like everybody else. And he went to Vietnam for 2 tours. Lucky for 5,598 families that he did that, because that's how many people he brought back off the battlefield, including 29 the day that he earned the Medal of Honor. So today, when our young Americans that come to our branch that have dreams of flying, when they leave our installation and they look at the bottom of that diploma, it is forever emblazoned with this man's legacy. So why do I talk about our enlisted force, our commissioned officers, our warrant officers? It's because of the sacred trust. Mike flew bombers and helicopters, so he was continually learning and evolving, transforming, so to speak. So he's pretty emblematic of our branch in the point in time that we stand today. So the priorities of the branch and the focus of all we do at the Aviation Center are about generating aviation warfighters who are disciplined leaders of character with sharp technical and tactical skills to match continuous transformation and win in combat for the ground force. We've been working hard on this the last couple years. And if we get it right, and I think we have, we've created a tightly cohesive force through Operation 83, increased rigor, focus on technical and tactical sharpening. You know, this takes time. You know, I see General Mangum out there, and he can probably raise his hand in his former TRADOC DCG hat and tell you how long it takes to change a POI in TRADOC. So we've been working hard on this the last couple years. Speaking of 2030, our transformation path is not without challenge. Earlier this year, as you heard the Undersecretary talk about earlier, Army senior leaders announced a series of hard decisions in the Aviation Rebalance Plan, including the termination of our FARA program at the end of this fiscal year. These decisions shifted investment in the rotary wing production base. They increased investment in unmanned aerial systems and launched effects and communicate clear commitment to FLRAA in 2030. I'll tell you, while much of the funding remained in the aviation portfolio, with flat Army budgets and the continued erosion of our buying power, we will have to closely manage our efforts in the coming years. We have to balance manned and unmanned capabilities as we tackle this human-machine interface and integration. We have to focus on what humans do best and what machines do best. You know, we should make first contact with unmanned systems if possible. Shame on us if we sacrifice the blood of America's sons and daughters when we can make contact unmanned. However, we can't do everything autonomously today. We still need trained warfighters. We need investment in S&T as we look at autonomy 20, 30 years out in areas like perception, natural language processing, decision making. Those are the things we've asked our S&T community to look at for us. You know, while we're talking about FARA, FARA was more than a platform. When Wally put this thing together and envisioned it, it was an ecosystem. It was a system of distributed sensors able to be put out there on future battlefields. So on future battlefields, we have a forward line of sensors and we have a forward line of robots in front of the forward line of troops. Well, we're retaining that. We're retaining that ecosystem of launched effects to bring a mixture of capabilities to inform ground commander PIRs, increase lethality, and most of all, present multiple dilemmas to our enemies. FLRAA will remain the cornerstone of our future. It brings transformational speed and range that's required in multiple warfighting functions. You heard about sustainment and medical evacuation from the Surgeon General earlier. But think about the strategic and operational implications of an aircraft that has a self-deployment range of over 1,300 miles and where that might take you. How you might be able to reach the European continent without activating the Air Force and all the I&W that goes with that. How you might be able to approach things in the Western Pacific from a different angle. It happens to be about that far from Darwin to the Philippines. The speed of FLRAA not only enables maneuver and medevac, but think about contested logistics across island chains and the reach of that platform. Let me talk about future tactical UAS a little bit. So future tactical UAS also envisioned in one of the 4 first pillars of what the CFT laid out a few years back. This will help us dominate. You heard about air-ground littoral earlier. That's a term being thrown around to describe this low airspace today. I like upper tier of the land domain. Why do I like upper tier of the land domain? Because Army aviators understand terrain. Army aviators are not the Air Force. They're part of the ground force. They understand things like IV lines and how to maneuver, and if somebody's in defilade. We take 3 out of every 4 warrant officer candidates from prior service soldiers because we want warrant officer pilots to understand the battlefield from that perspective. So it's important in this upper tier of the land domain that we can still dominate the terrain with the maneuver brigades and the air cavalry squadrons. As we're observing in Ukraine, our potential adversaries are learning lessons as well. Lessons aren't reserved just for us. And one of the things that we're seeing is there's a couple of articles out last week about UAS forward teamed with attack helicopters. We've watched an evolution of TTPs from Russian aviators who were flying during the day and high in the early phases of the war to now utilizing terrain. And a recent quote in one of those articles says that a gunner said these attack helicopters, they just pop up out of nowhere. Kind of by design. We have the aerial tier network extension. And Kane will get up here this week and talk eloquently about it, more eloquently than I. But what it does is enable air-to-air and air-to-ground networks, including the FBL ecosystem, and make us more resilient in night environments. This extension of Mission Command is critical for division and higher operations and the complexity of Mission Command in an ever more lethal and distributed environment. But transformation is more than about materiel. Army senior leaders also recently announced some structure decisions. For us, what that means is 12 full combat aviation brigades on active duty. It undoes modularity. It tailors CAB missions for parent divisions, heavy divisions, light divisions, and we enable the Air Assault Division with a 32-ship Chinook battalion. This does a couple things for us. As we looked at our gaps years ago, we said, hey, we need more reconnaissance and security capacity, and we've got to be able to air assault in one period of darkness a brigade. And so that's where these focuses are. In education and leader development, I talked about focusing on sharpening, and we've done this by upgrading our warrant officer PME. We now, for the first time, are going to align the warrant officer tracks, those readiness building warrant officers in our formations, those MTPs, those IPs, we're aligning their tracks with their professional military education. After all, if you look in the TRADOC manual, it says professional military education is at the precise point in time in an officer or non-commissioned officer's career to prepare them for their next job. Well, what does that more than tracking our warrant officers? So we're bringing that together. And General Brito is working with us at TRADOC to make that happen right now. You know, changes such as these are critical as we continuously transform, but we desperately need our industry partners out there. You know, I've had a lot of jobs in the Army, Wally and I, probably between the two of us, about all the jobs in the Army where an Army aviator touches industry that's outside of the actual acquisition profession, led by Rob Berry and Dave Phillips in our sector. We have great partners. We still want to be your partner. We need the distributed and layered approach to sensors envisioned by the FARA ecosystem. We need network resiliency, and we need it now. We must define the way ahead for the Apache as we move forward in the wake of the FARA decision. You know, I always say, you know what the greatest greatest attack helicopter in the world is? Jimmy Wilson would say the DAP, but I'll say the Apache, okay? It's the Echo model. You know what the second best one is? It's the Delta model, and we got them both. But we got to look for the path ahead on Apache and how we utilize it with the ecosystem moving forward, and how we team man-to-man, and we make greatest use of the data on the battlefield to inform commanders' decisions and operate faster than our adversaries. Industry, we need help rebuilding speed and production capacity in the industrial base. You heard the under comment on it earlier. You know, as we watch the meat grinder in Ukraine, if it showed us anything, it shows that armies rely on industry and the production base to bend metal and do it fast. You know, that was our forte in World War II, and we carried that on in the second half of the 20th century, and we need to look at that. We need flexibility in programs with the ability to rapidly insert technology as it evolves. We need to develop capacity in not just manned, but also unmanned platforms, so we have parallel tracks. We must sustain our current fleets as we reach to onboard FLRAA. All three components have to help us and be focused on fleet optimization, fleet right sizing, and sustainable strategies, which I'm sure Major General O'Connor will talk about later this week. Although transformation seems challenging, there are more near-term pressing issues right now for me as the branch chief, and that's safety. Our accident rates are far too high. We are 3 times the 10-year average so far this year. In our Apache community, we're 5 times the 10-year average. We talked last year about a drop in experience and that it was about a 4-year period till we got the increased accessioned warrant officers through their formative years into being those tracked warrant officers that help build readiness in our formations. In that period, we have to be rigorous and ruthless on risk mitigation. Commanders have to be engaged on crew mix and manage it appropriately. In the branch, we're doing a couple things to help from the institutional level. We are re-energizing training on loss of tail rotor effectiveness. At some point in the past, that term left our literature in the Army. It still exists in some of our sister service and FAA documents. Well, we're putting it back in, and we're designing the POI insertions right now in all the aircraft at Fort Novosel to make sure we train that. We're also re-looking power management. We've asked Redstone Test Center to help us validate our directional control margins. Those are the things we can control at the enterprise level that this 6-pack group is working on to assist UCAV command teams out there with mitigating this risk. You know, while the challenges seem to be everywhere for Army aviation, all is not lost. We are Army aviators. We have been here before. I was having breakfast with Tim Edens earlier this morning, and we were talking about our experience levels in the flight companies and troops in the mid-'80s. And as we began to lose our Vietnam veterans, how our aggregate experience levels went down. One of our challenges is we're not quite as static as we were then. We have these rotational force missions which are driving commanders to collective tasks quickly, and so we've got to make sure we master the fundamentals or be brilliant at the basics. With challenges to programs, listen, we've also been here before. August 8th, 1972, the Army canceled what was known as the Advanced Aerial Fire Support System. We might remember it as the Cheyenne helicopter. 8 days later, the Army started a program called the Advanced Attack Helicopter. And many of the technologies that were envisioned, developed, and innovated in the Cheyenne found their way into what we now know today as Apache. We have to be careful that we capture everything that the CFT and the PEO have done in the FARA efforts and transition that into our future programs. You know, this is a dangerous world. It's probably the most dangerous it's been since I first signed a contract at Fort Knox, Kentucky in July of 1986. But we remain agile and adaptive in Army aviation. We remain the most flexible maneuver force for ground commanders. So while the challenges are abundant, I think the future remains bright. Lastly, this is kind of a bittersweet Quad A summit for Sadie and I. It's been the honor of my lifetime to serve the 55,000 soldiers across all 3 components of our total Army aviation force for the last 2 years as your branch chief. When I stood on Howes Field 2 years ago, I mentioned that I had stood in that same spot on December 7th, 1973. And I watched Lieutenant General Daly and my dad's graduation formation fly over the top of that field. I can tell you right now, it's going to be pretty hard for me to walk off that field in July. So I'll finish where I started. We have a lot to be proud of in Army aviation. This is the force that dominated the jungles of Vietnam. Ask our friends back here from the 227th. This is the force that kicked open the door for Desert Storm. This is the force of choice for every soldier in contact during 20 years in Iraq and Afghanistan. We've done much since 1983, and we've done even more since 1861, but we have more to do. By working together, embracing innovation, fostering collaboration with industry, speaking clearly on requirements, and investing in our people and platforms, we can ensure that Army aviation always upholds the sacred trust. Together, we can ensure that when that soldier needs to know what's over the next hill, we're going to tell them. When they need just a little bit extra firepower, we're going to bring it. When they need to be put in a position of relative advantage, we're going to put them there. We're going to bring them their bullets and water. And God forbid, when that soldier's lying wounded on the battlefield, we are coming to get them. I am honored to serve alongside every one of you in this branch, yesterday, today, and tomorrow. This will defend above the best. Fly Army.
Thank you, General McCurry, for sharing the state of our branch, recognizing our heroes, and illuminating the way ahead. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our opening session. The exhibit halls are now open. Thank you, and have a great day.